So for today, we're discussing chapter 13, which begins on page 161. And somebody please read the title.
Why should superheroes be good? Spider-Man, X-Men, and current guards double danger.
Thank you very much. So, after reading the title of this essay, what can we make assumptions about? What's the topic?
Why superheroes act good.
All right, so why superheroes should be good. Are there particular ones that we're going to look at?
Spider-Man and X-Men.
Spider-Man and X-Men. What philosophy are we going to apply to these superhero characters?
The Plato's Republic part, or?
Yeah, we are applying Plato, but what's in the title?
I don't know how to say that.
Kierkegaard.
Kierkegaard's Double Danger.
Exactly. So you know that as you're reading this essay, you need to be looking for examples regarding superheroes, particularly Spider-Man and X-Men. You know that you need to be looking for Kierkegaard's philosophy, because that's the whole point of the essay, right? So keeping that in mind, let's see what C. Stephen Evans says. In his introduction, he reminds you of Plato's Republic. And he points you to particular lines from the text. He points you to lines 359C through 360B. These particular lines are talking about the ring of Gyges. Does anybody know what the ring of Gyges is? How many of y'all watched The Lord of the Rings? Who has a magic ring in The Lord of the Rings? The little dude. Frodo, right? What happens when the little dude puts the ring on? He turns invisible. Can he do anything he wants while he's invisible? Yes. So that's the ring of Gyges. Tolkien actually took the material for that story from the ring of Gyges. So you didn't know it, but when you were watching Lord of the Rings or reading Lord of the Rings, you were actually reading something that's from Plato's philosophy. Okay? So the ring of Gyges. A man finds a magical ring. He decides to use the magic for his own selfish desires. So he turns himself invisible. He breaks into the king's palace. He has sex with the queen. And then the queen and the man with the magical ring killed the king, and then he becomes ruler over the kingdom. That's the ring of Gyges. So he tells you that it is a magic ring. He tells you the story just like I did. So after he's told you that the idea of superhero with special powers is not a modern invention, he proves it to you by taking you all the way back to the ring of Gyges. So then he says, okay, well, let's talk about Plato, and let's question why we should be good if we could have power and use power to our own purpose. In the Republic, the story of magical power is told to pose the question as to whether people love justice or goodness for its own sake, or merely because they realize if they are unjust or immoral, they will suffer negative consequences. So Evans explores whether or not humans want to do good, or if the only reason they don't do bad is because they're going to face negative consequences, like going to jail, or paying a fine, or being grounded from your phone for 3 weeks and not getting on social media, right? Yes? So, that's where he starts off at. He tells you the story about Gyges' ancestor is narrated by Glaucon, who represents what we might call the immoralist viewpoint. So the narrator, according to Evans, is an immoral viewpoint. So if he's immoral, what do you think his stance is regarding power?
Like he wants it?
Yeah, he wants power. Is he going to use the power for the good? Is he going to use it for selfish desires? Oh, for sure. So the narrator of the story is selfish, so you want to keep that in mind. Turn the page to 162. And so after Stephen Evans provides you with a summary of Plato's Republic and talks to you about Glaucon, he then partially agrees with the continuum of opinion. Now remember, with your essay 3, I'm asking you to use your sources in 3 different ways. Do you remember those 3 ways?
Was it agree, disagree, middle ground?
Yes. So you have to have a source that you agree with, you have to have a source that you disagree with, and then you need a source that you partially agree and disagree with. So let's look at this. It seems all too likely that Glaucon is at least partly right about real-life human beings. In the actual world, many people would surely use any superpowers they possess for selfish and perhaps evil purposes. So he's saying, yeah, human beings are selfish, and yeah, we like to do things for ourselves, but that's not all that we are. So he's agreeing and disagreeing at the same time. Go to the bottom of page 162, and Evans brings in Socrates. So let's read. In the Republic, Glaucon goes on with the help of his brother, and I do not know how to pronounce his name, I'm sorry, pose a challenge to Socrates. Socrates wants to give a convincing argument that people should seek to be good and not merely appear to be good. So have you ever met one of those people where they put on this really good show, they make you think that they're really good-hearted, and they're just really good people, but man, you just have this weird vibe, weird feeling. They give you the creeps, is what some people say, right? That's what they're saying right here. So some people appear to be good, but they're really not. Glaucon says that if Socrates really wants to give a convincing argument for this claim, then he must show that the life of a person who's truly just, but thought by others to be unjust, is superior to the life of a person who's really unjust, but has a reputation for justice. To discover whether or not we really love justice for its own sake. Okay, so this is syllogistic thinking. SYLLOGISTIC. Syllogistic thinking. So syllogisms are 3 lines of statements, and every single one of the statements has to be true in order for the entire argument to be true. So this is what he's saying. There's somebody who's actually good, they're truly good, but everybody hates them because they think that they're not good. Then there's another person who everybody thinks is good, but they are horrible. They're an evil person. Would the person who's honestly good still continue to choose good behaviors although society hates them? So most of you in here are dual enrollment students, so think about school for a minute, right? You're at high school and a rumor starts. And so many of your friends start to hate you. Oh, I can't believe you did such and such. Would you still continue to make a good choice although all your friends are accusing you of bad stuff? Or would you just be like, ah, forget it. They're going to accuse me of it. I'm going to do it anyway. That's what they're asking right here. To discover whether we really love justice for its own sake. So that's what Evans wants to find out. Turn the page to 163, and he provides you with his research question. Now remember, when you wrote your research proposal for this course, I told you to consider some questions that you want to answer. In his essay, you're seeing the questions, right? Now, in academia, we should not place our questions in our paper. We should make strong, bold statements. In this book genre, it's okay because they're guiding the reader along the argument. They're not assuming that everybody who picks up this book is in college, has these great critical thinking skills. They're guiding you through the argument. So let's look at this research question. Why should someone with superpowers care about being good? Reflection on this case may shed some light on the question Plato wishes to pose about ourselves. So, I'm going to summarize what he's done so far. When he opens up his essay, he tells you about Plato's Republic and the Reina Diges. He summarizes the story. After he summarizes the story, he tells you that he wants to know whether or not good people will still choose to be good, or they'll turn to acting evil if everyone hates them. So he poses it in a question for you, and now Evan says, let's look at this, because this will tell us something about ourselves, something about human nature. Now that he's provided you with the research question, he introduces Kierkegaard and the philosophical concept of double danger. So, if we go back to the title, who do we know that we're getting ready to discuss?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man and X-Men. Exactly. He talks about Plato and how Plato views people and whether or not they're good. He talks about the thought experiment. He summarizes what he just discussed. And then he says, Plato's not the only one who discussed this. Many centuries later, there's a philosopher called Soren Kierkegaard, and he's known as the father of existentialism. So existentialism is another type of philosophy. Kierkegaard is known for being the person who starts it. He tells you when this person lives, and he tells you what text that the person has composed. Then he says, Kierkegaard describes the life we humans are called upon to live as a life of universal love. He claims that we are called by God to love our neighbors as ourselves and not allowed to say that anything falls outside the category of neighbor. So, what religious community does this echo? To love thy neighbor. Christianity. So we have a Judeo-Christian thinking process in this essay. So we know that Kierkegaard might be Judeo-Christian. At the very bottom of the page, obviously it's not easy to live such a life with love. To become loving in this way, we must overcome the natural selfishness and simple inertia that push us towards the satisfaction of our own desires when those desires conflict with the good of others. So, utilitarianism, if you remember, do the most amount of good for the most amount of people, right? Personalism is all about the individual person. Everybody is of equal value to the community. What's this saying? Is this utilitarianism or personalism?
Utilitarian.
Okay? Towards the satisfaction of our own simple inertia that pushes us towards the satisfaction of our own desires. Own. Does it say others? It says, oh, so that's personalism.
It's talking about overcoming.
Right. When those desires conflict with the good of others. So now, if it's in conflict and we have to overcome it, then we're going back to said, say it again, utilitarianism. Right. So we need to overcome our own selfish desires so that we can be better able to serve our community, which would be utilitarianism. So turn the page to 164. Now that Evans has introduced you to Kierkegaard, he's demonstrated that Kierkegaard has religious tendencies, and those religious tendencies are towards Christianity. Now he's going to introduce you to the double danger philosophical concept. And he says, Kierkegaard says that, you see the quotation mark? So he's actually quoting, the really true Christian struggle always involves a double danger. So we know for sure it's Christian, because there's a struggle in two places. First, in the person's inner being, where he must struggle with himself, and then, when he makes progress in the struggle, outside the person with the world. Kierkegaard believes that the thought experiment described in the Republic is not a hypothetical, contrary to fact situation, but it captures the reality of life where a person genuinely committed to the good. All right, so let's look at the first one. Put into your own words the first struggle. Self or others?
Yourself.
Yourself. Exactly. What's the second danger?
Others.
With others, yeah. So, this time of year is always really difficult for me, because this is the time of year where Americans love to make all these really huge, delicious meals, right? Yeah. Turkey, dressing, pie, mashed potatoes. Oh my gosh, I want to make myself hungry. And for me, I have 75 plus allergies. I hate going to get-togethers at the holidays because I have this inner struggle of, oh my God, I want the food, I want the food. And I'm fighting it, and I actually go to see everybody. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna drink my water, I'll bring my veggies, maybe I'll eat some meat if it doesn't have anything in it that I can't have, like lemon or pork or whatever. And I'll sit there and I'll just enjoy company. Then you know what happens? Why don't you eat my food? Don't you like my food? Oh, you're being rude because you're not eating my food.
Sorry, Karen, I really don't feel like dying today.
Who's Karen?
So then you have outside forces pushing in on you, right? So let's think about some superhero movies. So in Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice, at one point they actually have Superman dummy, an actual dummy, hanging from a noose, and they're showing now that society is mad at Superman, right? But does Superman choose to be bad? No. He still chose to be good. And so Evans is trying to figure out why. Why do people still choose to be good even when society hates them? Go down to the bottom of the page. Evans brings in Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross with their graphic novel known as Marvel. He also references the New Testament and Jesus. He references Martin Luther King. Turn the page, 165. He references Gandhi. So he's bringing in all these examples that are serving as his evidence. And then he brings in Superman, the Man of Steel. So what he did is he took real life examples and he showed you where this concept applies. And now that he showed you in real life, now he's going to go talk to you about the comics. Right? So he brings in Superman, and he's like, yeah, people tend to hate Superman, but we don't ever really see Superman like being challenged to choose to be good. Now, I need to remind you that this text was written in 2003 before they morphed Superman's character in cinema. Because now in cinema, Superman does tend to be a little bit more self-centered. A little. Doesn't he? What does he
Queen's
do?
release.
Does he beat up on Aquaman, Batman, and Wonder Woman?
Oh, it's I know what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
He beat him up in the Justice League. So please note, this essay was written before that cinematic portrayal of Superman. So he says that Superman does not experience turmoil regarding what is right and wrong, because he always seems to experience goodwill, which we just talked about isn't always the case. So Evans says, okay, well, let's go look at Spider-Man and see if Spider-Man experiences this or not. So he brings in Peter Parker, and he says that he struggles with ordinary human temptations as well as what it means to be a teen. He gives you examples of those different things that he experiences. Turn to page 166. He talks about his troubled relationships with MJ and his Aunt May. But he says, almost a little past halfway, there's never any worry that Peter will become an arch villain. What is in doubt is whether he can achieve the kind of selflessness that a real love and neighbor demands when it seems to him that he must be sacrificed for this is his personal happiness. Peter is tempted to be ordinary, not evil. So he's ruled out Superman, and now he's ruling out Spider-Man. He's saying, yeah, he's tempted, but there's no question, he's not going to be evil. So Spider-Man only experiences the first danger, he doesn't experience the second danger. So now we have to look at X-Men. And in this subsection, you actually see double danger. So you know that in this subsection, we are going to learn that somebody in the X-Men family does experience the double danger in some fashion. So he tells you that he's going to look at X-Men because it provides a better example of double danger. And then he summarizes the characters in the X-Men family, what their capabilities are, how they interact with one another, and the fact that they are mutants. Turn to page 168. The story of the mutants embodies both of the two dangers that Kierkegaard describes, and these difficulties are most memorably dramatized in the character of Logan or Wolverine. And he is right. Wolverine does make the perfect example for this. So what he's doing here is he has narrowed his argument all the way down to Wolverine. So he started off really big with the Rened Gyges and Kierkegaard and several different comic book characters. He's marked off Superman, he's marked off Spider-Man, and he's marked off most of the X-Men, and he's saying, all right, Wolverine is where I need to focus my argument. Okay? Turn to page 169. There does seem to be some awakening of moral concern in Wolverine as he begins to make personal connections. Alright, so for those of you that don't know about Wolverine, Wolverine literally has metal in his body. It's called adamantium. He is not a moral person, right? Sex, drugs, rock and roll, murder people. That's Wolverine. Okay? Now, when Wolverine comes to Professor X, he meets Dr. Green. And the only reason that Wolverine stays there at first is because he's sexually intrigued by Dr. Green. Okay? But as he stays on there, he starts to develop relationships and friendships with people. So he starts to make personal connections. So he morally progresses. Okay, so there's some moral growth going on in him. X-Men as a whole seem to illustrate the second difficulty Kierkegaard describes. Although they are committed to the good, they put that commitment into practice in serious and costly ways. They are rewarded for their concerns over others' well-being with fear, persecution, and hatred. So all throughout the X-Men movies, people are trying to lock up the mutants, and they're trying to give the mutants a cure to take away their X gene so that they will no longer be mutants. So these people are struggling with what's going on with themselves, and then even though they're trying to be good, society is just backlashing at them. So according to Evans, they meet the criteria for double danger. Mutants are hated not simply because of their goodness, but rather because of their differences. So now that he's proved to you that they meet both danger 1 and danger 2, Evans wants to find out, why are they good? So he reminds you of what he's been discussing in Plato, and now he says, well, now we might actually find an answer to this question that I posed at the very beginning of my essay. So turn the page to 170. On page 170, he says, let's consider some possibilities, and he actually numbers them. 1, the kind of life that's most effective at securing tolerance and acceptance from others. 2nd, X-Men simply have no choice but to follow the good. And then he says, the second one, there are some defects to it, and he lists what those defects are. And he tells you why it will not apply and why it would not work. Go to page 171. He says, now that I've dismissed all these things and I've showed you that they don't work, let's talk about X-Men do not appear to worry about legal sanctions or punishment. And they honestly don't. Because they have the power to get out of whatever prison they're in. Somebody's going to come for them. He uses a return sentence to remind you where he's at in his argument. So far, our search for the motivation of X-Men has been fruitless. Perhaps we should turn the question around and ask what motivates ordinary humans to be good. So now that I can't find an answer through my comic book heroes, let me see if I can find an answer through humanity itself. So he talks about raising children. That means that he's bringing in the sciences. He's bringing in, this is page 173. He's bringing in child development, and he's bringing in moral growth. People choose to do good when they have learned to love the good as a result of relation to those who are good. So, if you are raised by a loving family, you have a better chance at wanting to pursue the good than somebody who was not raised in a loving family. And he says that's why Peter Parker tends to want to do good, because his Aunt May and his Uncle Ben helped raise him in a loving home. He does use some qualifiers. He does admit that this doesn't apply across the board to everybody. Okay? So he's making sure the naysayers can't come back and say that his argument is unfounded. He acknowledges that so far only science has been proving his point, not the philosophy. Turn the page to 174. And he takes you back to Socrates, Glaucon, and the Republic. And he says it turns from psychological factors to deep philosophical questions about the character of the human self and the kind of universe we find ourselves in. We will be happier both in this life and after death if we live in accordance with justice by turning our attention to good. Morality reflects the true, deep character of the universe. Those who are committed to the good are committed to what is profoundly and eternally true. Evans says that Kierkegaard sees it as moral duties because all of us are implicated in this web of mutual responsibilities. These responsibilities give us certain obligations that are indicative of our relationships with one another. And this is what we call moral duties. So Kierkegaard and Evans are both bringing us back to moral duty. So we're dealing with morality, we're dealing with philosophy, and we're dealing with the pursuit of the good. At the bottom of 175, he says that Kierkegaard is right, that we humans do have an excellent reason for caring about the good. Our own deepest and ultimate happiness is found by following the path of neighbor love. 176. For they may discover that it is in loving the neighbor that they best connect with the love of the one who perfectly loves them and call them into existence or life together with himself. So what's the answer to his question? Why do superheroes and humans tend to be good?
Makes us happy.
Yeah, it makes us happy. We're drawn to the good, and because we're drawn to the good, we need to be fulfilled. We need to feel like we're doing good. And in the process of doing good, we're fulfilled, we're happy, we're fulfilling our moral duty because we're living in kind and responsible relationships with one another. So superheroes do what is good because they're drawn towards the good. They recognize the fact that it's in our relationship with one another that we become fulfilled. So he starts off really broad, and he narrows it all the way down. And unlike most of the people in this collection of essays, he takes a religious perspective. So now, reader response question. What did you think of this essay? There is no right or wrong. Reader response is simply their opinion.
That was interesting.
Okay, tell me why.
Because he used logic reasoning and he related it to the superheroes that we know from the movies.
I thought it was good because he kind of made it relatable for like all like readers of any type.
Say it one more time.
He made it like relatable to any type of reader.
Yeah.
Any like real life basis.
He did. He used a lot of examples that we can relate back and forth. McKenna.
He used people in like real life situations, with, like following what Talon said to make it more relatable. And then he took it into the comics so we could help understand what he was trying to get his point across.
Yeah.
Yeah, good argument.
That's high praise coming from you. So what do you find good about his argument?
He just supported it very well. With all the examples we gave, we used religion and poetry and movies and like basic logic.
Yeah, so he had a diversity of sources going on in his essay. I agree. I mean, that diversification definitely adds to his ethos and makes the argument more sound. Savannah?
I found this one interesting, and I think it would be more interesting to see somebody make the same argument but with a different religion.
That would be interesting.
I would like to see the differences in how they argue over the morality and ethics.
You would get that if you go to the Journal of Pop Culture. You'll read other articles that are like that. Any other comments?
Is there a reason you didn't cover Spider-Man's second danger?
Is there a reason why I didn't cover it?
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to keep it very simplified for everybody in the class. Do you want me to cover it?
It doesn't bother me. I say it doesn't bother me, then I mention it, but like, I don't know.
So what do you want to talk about it?
Oh, wait.
I mean, like the newspaper guy, J. Jonah Jameson,
Give us a page number.
166.
Let's all go to 166. And give us a paragraph. The last paragraph?
Yeah, it's like the last paragraph.
Right here. Would you read the paragraph for us, please?
To some degree, Spider-Man also experiences Kierkegaard's second danger. To be sure, most of the people he helps seem properly grateful for his good works. However, J. Jonah Jameson, the editor of the newspaper where Peter Parker works as a photographer, consistently portrays Spider-Man as a menace to society. His good deeds are reinterpreted and spun so as to make them appear to be opposite of what they are. The real truth is that Jameson may be uncomfortable in the presence of a superpowered god goodness, as Kierkegaard predicted most people would be. Whether Jameson really believes that Spider-Man is a danger is unclear. The editor is simply an paradigm of the practical man. His only interest is in making money by selling newspapers, and if portraying Spidey as nefarious helps him towards the goal, he will continue to do that with enthusiasm.
Keep going.
Curiously, despite this consistently negative press, ordinary people do not seem to hate Spider-Man or fear him. However, if the world of Spider-Man is anything like the actual world, then a consistent portrayal of the media as a villain is bound to have an effect in the long run. We can predict that besides his personal struggles with his vocation, Spider-Man will increasingly face the painful situation Kierkegaard describes, in which the world does not applaud his heroic virtue. Either people will cynically refuse to believe in his goodness, or else, if they do not acknowledge it, they may follow Glaucon's prediction and ridicule him as a major chump, at least behind his back.
So what do you think of Evans' claim that it's only Jameson that is spinning the spider story in a negative light? Do you think that's accurate?
I mean, when you put it in the press, I think people are down to believe this.
Yeah. So what are some things in the press that we tend to believe, regardless?
Anything about the president?
Anything about the president? Yeah.
Celebrities being pregnant.
Celebrities being pregnant is a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Y'all remember the negative press when Governor Fallon's daughter had her mobile home or trailer or whatever it was on the gubernatorial grounds? And everybody was upset. Y'all don't remember this?
No.
Oh my gosh. That was very chaotic. Yes?
I think the media just stirs up the biggest story to get the biggest reaction.
Yeah.
They do. Now, I don't know if y'all know this, but all of the media in this country is owned by one company.
No.
One company.
Biggest plot twist of 2018.
Sorry, say again?
Biggest plot twist of 2018.
So, it's really hard to get a non-biased viewpoint in news, although they do try to show some differences with like NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox, but they're still all owned. That's why you'll see those news anchors change corporations. It's easy for them to change. But changing a TV show, that's a whole different story. Because that's not news, those are TV shows. Yeah, so he does experience with Jameson the second danger. And to some degree, in the movies, for sure, the crowd gets mad at him. But I think those movies were published after this was written. I think. I would have to go look at the timeline on Spider-Man. Now the comics, that's a different story. It's in the comics. So he could have acknowledged it in the comics. But he used Spider-Man 2 in the movie. So I'm not for sure which one he's referencing. And that's a really good catch. Anybody have any other questions?
Gotcha.